Hello everyone, welcome to Medicated Housewife DIY, where crafting and mental health come together. My name is Sarah. Today's DIY video is using the Dollar Tree Tumbling Tower Blocks, that is the Dollar Tree Jenga Blocks, and some Dollar Tree wood cubes. We are making some gorgeous riser trays. They're for kitchens or bathrooms or even for just display. They're clean looking, they're modern, they're just beautiful, and you're gonna love them. So stick around and let's go make some stuff and jump right into this. In today's DIY video, we are making 3 styles of tumbling tower block trays or risers. These are Dollar Tree Jenga block trays, but they're really simple and really quick to make, and they look like clean and modern decor. So let's get started. To begin with, and for all 3 trays or risers, we'll be using the Dollar Tree Tumbling Tower Blocks, the Dollar Tree Wood Cubes, and some Dollar Tree Super Glue Wood Glue. For DIY number 1, I started with 12 rows of 6 Jenga blocks. They're glued from end to end using the wood glue. And I made 12 rows of 6 blocks using a total of 72 blocks for each of my 3 trays. And just so you understand, your tray doesn't have to be 12 rows across. You could easily do this with 10, 8, or even 6 rows for a smaller riser tray. That's totally up to you. After my 12 rows of 6 blocks are glued and fully dried, I decided to stain them, and I wanted them to be a nice medium brown, but not really as dark as my wood stain or even as dark as the Waverly Antique Wax. So I decided to use instant coffee to stain them, and I usually make a big bowl of this coffee stain and then I'll let the whole bunch of blocks soak in it like overnight and let them dry, but I didn't have time for that this time, so I figured I'd try using the coffee like a regular stain and just painting it on there. I ended up adding so much coffee to this water that my coffee, it was actually almost syrup-like, but I really wanted to get as deep a color as I could without having the time to soak the blocks, so I painted on my super strong instant coffee onto all 12 rows of the 6 blocks, and that's on both sides and both edges of all 12 rows. I let the first coat dry, and I did do a second coat, and that seemed to do the trick to give me a nice warm deep brown. And by the way, I use the absolute cheapest instant coffee that I can find since I'm not drinking it. I'm just painting with it. So my idea and inspiration for this first tray was using these warm brown wood rows of wood and contrasting that with natural color wood cubes. This is how I initially did this first tray, as you are seeing me do here. And you will see in the reveal, though, it ends up being something a little bit different. And I will explain to you why that is a little later in the video when we get there. So basically, using our wood glue, I have all the Jenga block rows standing on their side, and I am gluing the wood cubes in between each row on both sides. And that's about a ½ inch in from the end on each of those sides. I also use a wood cube on the outside of the end row on both sides of the tray as well. Sounds complicated, it's not. You'll see what I'm doing here. You will also see in the other 2 DIYs that I did eventually figure out a way to make the spacing for the cubes and to keep the whole tray straight a little easier on myself, but this was my first one, so this is the one I made all my mistakes on, but isn't that the way it always goes? But the big lesson learned here was to use more glue than what I'm using here. So I'm telling you, use more glue. If you make this tray yourself, you're going to want to use more glue in between your cubes and blocks. The Dollar Tree wood glue can be a really strong hold in most cases, but sometimes when you're using certain stains on the Jenga blocks, or even an untreated like naked wood Jenga block, the hold can be like a little loose. So I recommend using as much glue that you can use without making it a gluey mess. If future Sarah could have told present Sarah to use more glue, I would have done that. Although not on camera for whatever reason, the final thing that I did do for this riser tray was to glue 4 additional wood cubes under the 4 corner cubes to act as feet and to give our riser tray some height. And this is how our first riser tray turned out. And I know you're looking at it saying, what? That's not the tray you just showed us. Well, you are correct. This is where our little glue issue came into play. After the glue had dried, I went to lift the tray and literally it broke into 3 separate pieces. I was bummed, I'm not gonna lie, but I looked at the 3 pieces, took the 2 end pieces of each side and used those as legs, and I glued them under the main piece of 4 rows that I had left. I made this lovely little mini riser tray, and I have to say, I like it anyway. I like the contrasting wood colors, and I think it's adorable to use for plants or candles or whatever little knickknacks you want to put on it. Just another reminder that there are no mistakes in crafting, just happy accidents. Moving on to DIY number 2, I glued another set of 12 rows of 6 Jenga blocks, the same as I did in DIY number 1, and when those had dried, I stained them with this Zinsser Bullseye Shellac in the color Amber. Now, I don't use it a lot, but I wanted a natural finish, but with the tiniest tinge of color, and this shellac is just that. It gives the wood a natural but goldeny kind of finish. I'll link it for you below if you are not familiar with it. After staining the blocks, I grabbed about 30 or so of the Dollar Tree wood cubes, and I used the same amber color stain to give them a nice goldeny color, and then I let those dry. So this time, although I'm going to attach the cubes the same way as DIY number 1, this time I used the ruler from Dollar Tree to try and keep the rows straight. And I took 1 cube to use as a spacer cube on the end of each row so that all of the cubes glued down would be the exact same distance from the end of the row. So I take 1 cube as a spacer cube, and I take another cube and glue the second cube right next to it, then remove the spacer cube. I also just placed a cube on the other side of that same row that I'm working on. I just place it there just to help keep all the glued rows more stable. Just a note here, when you glue the cubes to the blocks, you are looking at the bottom of our tray. The bottom is facing up at us. So you want to make sure that the best looking edge of all of your rows of blocks is facing down, because that's going to be the top. And you're pushing the cubes down to the very bottom of the blocks when you glue them, because our cubes are a little shorter than the height of the block when it's standing on its edge. And we want the blocks and the cubes to be flush on the top side, the side that's facing down now, the side that we're going to see. That's the side that we're going to be looking at when it's standing right side up. Hopefully that makes sense. Just watch what I'm doing and I think it'll be a little clearer. When I'm done with the first side, I flip the ruler over to the other side and I'm going to glue the cubes to the other side using the exact same spacer cube method as we did on the first side. Don't forget to put a single cube on the outside of your first row and on the outside of your last row on both of the sides, sort of on the corners, as you can see that I have here. When all my rows are glued together, I take the final 4 cubes and I glue them as feet onto the 4 corners of my riser tray. Now, if you didn't want this to be a riser, you can always just skip adding the feet and then the tray will just rest flat. And this is how riser tray number 2 turned out. I really like this one. I think it's so clean and modern looking, and personally for me, it just screams spa or like master bath. I like it with some rolled towels or washcloths, some little bathroom accessories, maybe a mini plant or a candle. You could also use this in a kitchen near the sink for maybe your sponge to dry on or your little kitchen accessories resting on it. I just think it's so clean looking, and I happen to love the natural golden finish. Let me know in the comments what you think. Does it say bathroom to you or kitchen? I want to know what you think. For DIY riser tray number 3, again, we glued together 12 rows of 6 blocks and allowed those to dry. And this time I painted all 12 rows with my Waverly Antique Wax on all sides and on the edges. I gave very generous coats and then I put that aside to totally dry. Next, I used the same Waverly Antique Wax on my wood cubes as well. When my cubes and blocks are dry, I set them up the exact same way that I glued DIY number 2, with my ruler to hold the rows straight and using the spacer cube method to space out my cubes before I glue them down. I glue one full side and then I flip the ruler over, and I do the same thing to the other side, all of it exactly the same way as we did in DIY number 2. Then we take our 4 final cubes and glue them down in all 4 corners as feet for our riser tray. Again, you can leave the feet off if you'd rather have a flat tray. And this is how DIY number 3 turned out. Initially, I was going to do all 3 trays with contrasting colors between the cubes and the blocks, but in the end, I really just liked the light blocks with the light cubes and those darker blocks and those darker cubes together. It just seemed like more of a modern, clean look. But what's your opinion? Let me know in the comments if you would like the contrasting colors or the tone-on-tone matching colors. I think this riser tray is perfect for little plants. I really love the dark brown with greenery or light colored candles. I think you could use this tray in any room of your home. And these are all 3 of our Tumbling Tower Jenga Block riser trays. All 3 similar but different at the same time, and all 3 super simple and easy to do. Sometimes simple is beautiful. I hope you enjoyed this Medicated Housewife DIY, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more fun, easy, and beautiful DIYs. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, I'm the Medicated Housewife, and crafting is my medication.